Say hello and welcome to Dr. Eric Loucks. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks. My pleasure.
We're happy to have you here, and congratulations on opening the new Mindfulness Center at Brown University.
Thanks.
So, want to give you a full introduction. So, Dr. Eric Loucks is the director of the new Mindfulness and Cardiovascular Health Lab at Brown University. He's formally trained in cardiovascular physiology and mindfulness interventions. He has over 75 peer-reviewed publications. His work on mindfulness and cardiovascular health has been published in well-known media outlets like Time, U.S. News and World Report, CNBC, and the Washington Post. So we're happy to have you here today to talk all about mindfulness and the great work that's going to be done at the new center. So we're excited to talk about it. Before we dive in and talk about the dual mission at the Mindfulness Center, let's talk a little bit about what mindfulness is, because maybe people know about kind of maybe a buzzword to some, but not everybody really understands what it means.
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the most common definitions is that's by John Kabat-Zinn is paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally, and so that's kind of like a stock definition. You know, I often talk about it as present moment awareness of our thoughts, our emotions, our physical sensations, but like in a non-judgmental way with like curiosity and acceptance. So, say for example, if I went across the street and ordered one of those tasty sweet items across the street, so a moment of mindfulness would be to really be there for eating that tasty treat and really maybe enjoying it and noticing the flavors. And then another moment of mindfulness might be, 15 minutes later when I've got a sugar high going on, and just noticing that in a non-judgmental way. And that non-judgmental thing is kind of unique to mindfulness. Often in the society in the U.S., we can be kind of hard on ourselves and be like, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that thing, like here I go again, I'm this and that. But really, it's like curiosity, acceptance. I did that for a really good reason. Sweet things taste really good. Up until a couple hundred years ago, sweet things weren't so common, so we're kind of set up to eat sweet things or fatty things or salty things when we can get them. So kind of just notice that and really lean into it in a kind way to myself, and then that information can help potentially lead to some insights around how I'm going to be next time I get offered something in that category or whatever. So.
I like the approach of it from a non-judgmental way. So a lot of your work over the past many years has been how mindfulness thought process of it is tied to our physical health. And you've approached this from, a lot of your research has been approached from the cardiovascular way.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your background. You and your colleagues had been tied to research, kind of groundbreaking research, approaching how mindfulness is linked to cardiovascular health. Talk to me about your background in that research that you had worked on.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm trained as a cardiovascular physiologist and then also as a social epidemiologist. So I know a lot about cardiovascular disease, but also know quite a bit about the social context through which it happens. And then I've also been doing mindfulness meditation myself for like 20 years and researching it for about 8 years now, I guess. And so we just put in some measures into this big study of about 800 people that we just measured their kind of everyday mindfulness. Not many of these people at all were even meditating, actually.
Oh, it was just every day.
It's just how aware they were of their thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, and I had all these really elaborate measures of like cardiovascular risk. Like we had DEXA scans where people go through the scanner and you actually measure like the fat tissue itself and the amount of it. And we had glucose regulation stuff and smoking and blood pressure and all kinds of things. So I just started running analyses on it and finding all this stuff was coming out, that people were much more likely to be obese if they had low levels of mindfulness. Their glucose regulation tended to be more out of whack. They were more likely to smoke, less likely to be physically active if they weren't very mindful. And so I really started to see, well, maybe there's a signal here, maybe there's something going on. And so from that, we started creating customized mindfulness interventions. So we have one running out of Brown right now that's called mindfulness-based blood pressure reduction. And if anyone's interested in enrolling, just email us at mindfulness@brown.edu. And we're showing some pretty promising effects on blood pressure.
Wow.
Elena Samarago-Blocher, who's one of our center members, is also doing a lot on cardiovascular disease and has done some stuff with phone-based mindfulness interventions for people with implantable cardiodefibrillator devices. So that's something inside the heart, that if someone has an arrhythmia, it gives them a bit of an electrical shock, actually, and it helps reset the heart out of the arrhythmia. And so she found that these phone-based interventions had some preliminary findings to potentially help people with a stress recovery after one of these devices going off that can be quite painful and scary. And so
just maybe talking through with someone, so after goes off, talking through them through a mindfulness.
I mean, they were actually training them up so that those coping strategies would be there when stressors came up.
Okay.
And so one of the things with mindfulness interventions is it seems to help people become more comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yeah. And so it creates this ability to be resilient, to kind of maybe to take a step back from ourselves a little bit, to know that those thoughts are just thoughts and we don't necessarily have to act on them. That those physical sensations are happening for a really good reason. But it doesn't mean that it's all of us. And so sometimes being able to take that step back from the things that just come up in daily life can help us not be as reactive to stress.
Okay. A deep breath can really go a long way. If you haven't figured that out, I suggest trying it, right? Yeah. Deep breaths are a wonderful form of medicine. So as you move forward, it's fascinating the type of research that you've worked on, and then really looking at research. So talk to me about the mission that you have at the Mindfulness Center, because it is dual.
Right, yeah, thanks, yeah. So we just launched this Mindfulness Center at Brown about a month ago, and as I was mentioning earlier, it almost felt like we had all the pieces of the puzzle around Rhode Island, and we just needed to put them together. And so we have a bunch of remarkable researchers doing really high quality, rigorous research on impacts of mindfulness on health, and looking at the whole spectrum all the way from positive effects to even potentially adverse effects. And so one of the missions of our center is to really do methodologically rigorous research on the impacts of mindfulness on health. And we're pretty inclusive of all different forms of mindfulness interventions and really try to be interdisciplinary as well. So we have people from across the campus, whether it's contemplative studies or the Faculty of Medicine or the School of Public Health or psychiatry, all coming together to look at these problems in different ways. So that's one of the two missions, and the other mission is around service. And so basically we're creating with our community partners. We have about a dozen community partners that are all doing mindfulness interventions around the state, and we're creating this website that'll be at brown.edu/mindfulness center, where people who want to learn about mindfulness, it'll be a bit of a pipeline to see what are the evidence-based mindfulness programs in the state of Rhode Island, what's the evidence base behind them, who are the providers, what are their target patient populations, and what do those providers do to make sure that they're doing really high quality interventions themselves. And so that way there's sort of, mindfulness is like $1 billion industry in the U.S. right now, and a lot of people are wanting to learn about it, but what are the evidence-based programs out there, and who's doing them, and so can we help connect people to that.
How important is it if you are looking for help to improve your lifestyle in a healthy manner, how important is it to link up with someone that has evidence-based results? Like, because you just mentioned, it's a very prominent industry right now, and you don't want to link up with someone that's a sham, right? I mean, because unfortunately, people are out there that could be taking advantage of others, right?
Yeah, it's complicated, So the person who's taught me the most mindfulness in my life, her name's Joanne Friday. She's a wonderful teacher in Rhode Island, and she doesn't collect quantitative data on what she does. She just teaches people how to do this stuff, and so it doesn't mean if somebody doesn't have the evidence base that they're not really good. But those that do have the evidence base, or the programs that do, there's that scientific trust behind it that okay, this type of intervention, when it's standardized and offered across different platforms and different people can be teaching it, it's sort of tried and tested that it seems to work pretty well, like mindfulness-based stress reduction or acceptance and commitment therapy or dialectical behavior therapy. So these are kind of standardized ones, so they're safe. If someone doesn't have an evidence base and they're teaching it, they may be amazing and they may not. And it's harder to know, like word of mouth is another way, and Rhode Island is really good at word of mouth, so you kind of get a feel for who's really doing good stuff, and that's totally valid too. But this is, Brown, and this is a research center, so our niche that we're offering is a platform to let people know what the evidence-based programs are. It doesn't mean if there's certain programs out there that don't have evidence-based, doesn't mean that they're not outstanding, but the way that we're operating is within the evidence-based stuff.
Okay.
That's just sort of what we do.
Do you find that this has become more and more popular, but more and more prominent due to people like yourselves who are putting in the research and finding that it can make an influence on people's lifestyles, on people's health? Do you find that with more and more research moving forward that we can see positive impacts on people's health if you're putting out these research studies? Because Brown, like you mentioned, is well known for research. Are there goals and targets set as you move forward, do you think, to put out, publications?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we're putting out dozens a year with our group. And, on the research side of things, our biggest strategy right now is going for some pretty major center grants that will help us coalesce and get funding infused into our group. So we got about a $5 million grant from the National Institutes of Health a couple years ago, and so that really brought in a lot of infrastructure, and we're just kind of continuing along those routes. So a big thing that we're building towards right now is really helping us do the best quality work that we can. Mm-hmm. So that's around looking for funding, whether it's through National Institutes of Health or donors. We're also talking with potential donors because it's really a wonderful chance to make a difference for a donor these days as well. So there's that element to it, but then also just doing the best work that we can do, because we're actually already quite well funded and running a number of studies. Brandon Gaudiano's looking at mindfulness interventions to prevent hospital readmission for people with schizophrenia or psychosis, and really showing some big improvements there. Willoughby Britton has been looking at what she calls like the varieties of contemplative experience with her collaborator Jared Lindell, and that looks at people that might not have such a good experience with mindfulness interventions too. And so we're trying to really be careful to see who mindfulness interventions can be really effective for and when we should be careful as well. And so we've got people really looking at many different angles of this.
All ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
What I find really intriguing about this is, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't pertain to mindfulness, but we have a problem in this country about drug use. We have the opioid epidemic. As we move forward in the medical industry, there could be a problem with people relying too much on medication. You've done a lot of work with cardiology. There's a lot of people who take blood pressure medication. So looking at other ways to help people with blood pressure through mindfulness, it's really intriguing to see, are there other methods to help people with their daily health struggles? So I've talked to people on this program before about doing yoga for back pain, physical therapy for back pain, just different research. So talking about using mindfulness to be able to take them through lowering their blood pressure. So being able to have this facility in our own backyard, and I'm looking forward to seeing the research and results that come out of this. It's really exciting to see. So if there's any way, whether it's mindfulness and medication, or whether it's combination. So I look forward to seeing that. You just mentioned a couple things that you are currently working on. Do you have any other that you can share with us?
Sure. I mean, as you're talking about sort of drug use and stuff, we launched this randomized controlled trial at Brown for emerging adults. These are adults that are sort of aged 18 to 23, often, in our case, college undergraduates, but from around the city. And we've created this program called Mindfulness-Based College, and they get trained up in mindfulness practices that help with things like attention control, like being able to place their mind where they want to place it, being able to enhance their self-awareness, so how do they feel when they're eating certain things, or when they're physically active, or when they're drinking or smoking certain things, or with certain people, or getting different amounts of sleep. So we train them up in some of those skills, but then direct them towards the relationship with the things that tend to influence well-being and performance in emerging adults. And so they start to explore their relationship with alcohol and drugs, and with their diet, and with their physical activity, and with their sleep, and with their stress, and their social relationships. And we're showing some pretty remarkable reductions in alcohol consumption over the term, actually. And even we're seeing, like, as the term goes along, you know, stress goes up as we get close to final exams, the term papers are due. And so those that are in the control group that don't get the intervention, their depressive symptoms are going up significantly.
Yeah.
And in the control group, it's just staying flat. And so they're getting that resilience in the presence of that stress, for example. So that's some other examples of research that we've got going on. But if you check out our website, you know, you'll see at thebrown.edu/mindfulness center, that'll be up in a week or two. You'll see all the different projects that we've got going on.
That's incredible. So if people are interested, it's my understanding they can't just walk in and grab an appointment with you, right? If people are interested in maybe participating in research, or if they want to link up with a provider, what's the best way to go about that?
Yeah, again, just checking out that website. And
we'll provide a link to that.
Yeah, so we'll be able to, if you're interested in the programs, there'll be a service tab, and then you just click on that and see the different ones that are out there, and whether it's research or whether it's just ones that are offered in the community. And so it'll be should hopefully be a good resource for Rhode Islanders to really see what's available to them in the state.
Wonderful. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it, giving us some insight on mindfulness and what your missions are at the Mindfulness Center. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Congratulations again to you. Kind of pulling this all together. I know it's been a process, and I'm really excited. Looking forward to hearing. Hopefully you'll come on and share the latest results. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
All right, great. Well, hang tight, everyone, as we get set up for our next guest. Again, I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, see you soon.
Hang tight, everyone.
Thanks.